2311 Racing and Firm Motorsports will run its open teams this weekend at Dover and next week at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and NASCAR is expected to head to San Diego in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into this really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Gretchen Wilson. As reported by JC.com yesterday, that Gretchen Wilson will perform a pre-race concert at Daytona before the Coke Zero Sugar 400 takes place. Gretchen Wilson, someone who has not really had a big hit in the country charts since like the mid-2000s, I'm pretty sure. She's been in the industry for many, many years. As someone, though, hasn't been relevant in a long time, to be honest with you. But it's interesting they're bringing her out. I hope she can do a really good job at a pre-race concert. She'll probably get a solid crowd, all things considered, out there. But to be honest, it's probably not going to be the most exciting crowd out there. But cool that she gets a chance and opportunity to perform a pre-race concert at Daytona International Speedway. Really interesting stuff. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar merch sales. As was reported by Adam Stern last night, that Pat O'Ward is the leading IndyCar driver in merchandise sales for 2025. They didn't release the rest of the list throughout the tweet that Adam Stern had, but he noted Pat O'Ward was number one. That does not shock me and surprise me. Pat O'Ward has been super, super popular in IndyCar world, plus being part of McLaren, one of the biggest brands in the world as well, is going to give you the chance and opportunity to really grow your branding. So this did not shock me or surprise me. Now, I don't know who's second. I think for Indy 500 was Kyle Larson. I'm pretty sure wouldn't surprise or shock me considering how big it was for Larson to run the Indy 500 this year. Wouldn't surprise me or shock me if he was second behind Pat O'Ward. I don't even know if Pelot's in the top five. I'm not sure. But pretty interesting. Pat O'Ward is number one. That's a big reason why they're going to Mexico most likely next year and why it's going to be replacing the NASCAR date for 2026. Pretty cool that Pato is the number one in merchandise sales. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the ESPYs. Now, ESPYs always take place every single year, and they have a category for the best driver. And this year's winner for the 2025 ESPYs for the best driver goes to Max Verstappen. Now, Max Verstappen, of course, won the Formula One championship. This is the third year he won the championship in a row. I gotta say, though, and I'm gonna be real and honest, I really don't think Max Verstappen should have won it this year. Yes, he won the Formula One championship, but I think the honor should have gone to Alex Palou. Alex Palou had a dominant season last year, while not as dominant as this year was. Alex Palou has been the best driver in the world. He competed at Le Mans. He competed in a lot of different events. Max had a very solid season, won a lot of races early in the year, and he kind of fell off in the second half of the season. So I personally think it should have gone to Alex Palou. Now, some saying Joey Logano should have won it. No, absolutely not. Joey Logano had a 17th-place average finish. Yes, he got 3 or 4 wins that season, but Joey Logano absolutely did not deserve to be the best driver, considering he wasn't even the best driver 2024. Kyle Larson was absolutely the best driver of last season, but they go by who the defending champion was. But I think it was going to be Max or Palou. I think it should have gone Palou, but Max would have been my second choice. At least the top 2 were correct, but I don't think it should have been Verstappen. I think it should have been Palou. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, Trackhouse Racing so far has had a fantastic and really good season as they scored 4 wins in the NASCAR Cup Series so far. As you know, this is the most for the organization the team has had in the 5 years they have been around. Trackhouse Racing all time has around 10 or 11 wins. Ross Chastain, of course, has 6 wins with the organization. Shane Gisbergen has 4. And Daniel Suarez has 2 wins for the organization so far, meaning all time they've scored 12 wins as an organization. 3 of those wins this year, of course, have come from Shane Gisbergen, while the other one has come from Ross Chastain. And I would not be surprised or shocked if you see that number increase. I think there's a good chance they'll win Watkins Glen. They're going to win a lot of races as an organization, a team over the years, and I think that what they're doing is phenomenal. Getting Red Bull back to victory lane, I thought was incredible to see. So nonetheless, pretty incredible. The Trackhouse has 4 wins so far this year, and trust me, I don't think it'll be the last time we'll see that team win races in the NASCAR Cup Series this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, last night, for the first time in 5 years, you had a major dirt race that was taking place on TV, and it was a high-limit race at Eldora Speedway for, I think, the Joker's Jackpot. Now, this race is not for points. It was kind of like an exhibition event, but the driver who won this event would score $100,000. That driver who go to victory lane would be none other than Kyle Larson. The main A feature was wild. There was a big crash that happened early in the race. A lot of chaos happened throughout the event, but Kyle Larson made the pass on Rico Bruce about 20 20 laps to go and picked up the win and scored $100,000. This is huge for Kyle Larson because Kyle Larson and this team have been off a little bit with their momentum as of late. There just hasn't been the consistent momentum with the 5 team. So I hope this win for Larson can really turn it around. Maybe Larson could have a big weekend at Dover. I think he will be a factor to win Dover, considering Kyle Larson historically has been really, really good at Dover over the years. So I do expect he'll be a pretty big factor to maybe get it done this weekend at Dover. But getting the win is a huge deal for Kyle Larson. So congratulations, Kyle Larson, on winning the high limit race at Eldora. A well-deserved and well-earned victory. Glad to see him get in there and get it done. Good for him to get that done for sure. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about David Starr. As it was confirmed yesterday that David Starr will drive the 53 for Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Dover Motor Speedway. Originally, Takuma Koga was supposed to be the driver behind the wheel of this car, or the number 35. Glenn Reen is going to be the driver of that car. I believe there was some sort of things with the approval process that have kind of denied Takuma Koga the opportunity to race this weekend. David Starr has a ton of experience. He's been around in NASCAR for over 25 years at this point, so it didn't surprise or shock that they chose David Starr to be behind the wheel. I think David Starr is an underrated driver all time, in all honesty. I know he doesn't have all the stats to back it up, and I know what happened with Noah Gragson at Homestead, but the guy's won a lot of truck races in his career. So I think he deserves a little bit more respect for what he's done in his motorsports career. So nonetheless, I'm glad to see him get the chance and opportunity to race once again with Joey Gase Motorsports. I think this car has to qualify in owner's points, I'm pretty sure. So it might be tough for him to get it done. But nonetheless, I think it's going to be a solid opportunity for him. We'll see how David Starr can do this weekend at Dover Motor Speedway and Dover International Speedway as well with the Joey Gase Motorsports team. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Bilicki. As it was announced yesterday morning that Josh Bilicki will drive the 66 for Garage 66 this next weekend at the Brickyard 400. This is going to be the third or fourth time we have seen him drive this 66 this year. We've seen other drivers get behind the wheel. Casey Mears made a start at Martinsville. Bilicki's made 2 or 3 prior starts so far in that car. Mike Wallace was originally going to be the driver of the 66 for the 2025 Daytona 500, but unfortunately we all know what kind of happened there where Mike was denied that chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel. Josh Bilicki, in my opinion, is a very underrated race car driver. The guy can do really good things, and he got benefited from Chris Wright no longer being in the Xfinity series, so that helps quite a bit. But I think Bilicki is someone who could have a decent performance. Now, the 66 cars had a lot of struggles on the ovals this year, so that's going to be the big question. If we have more than 40 cars that do show up to the race at Indianapolis for the Brickyard, I think Josh Bilicki could be in a little bit of question and could be in jeopardy of making the field. But I think Bilicki is a talented enough guy that he can take a car that isn't that great and take that car and move up to the front. So we'll see how Bilicki does next weekend at the Brickyard 400, but I do think he'll have a solid opportunity. I think he's going to do a really, really good job for sure. I think he's very talented. I think Bilicki's underrated, and I think he'll have a solid chance and opportunity to make this year's Brickyard 400. I think he'll do good, and I think he'll have a good chance and opportunity to maybe go out there and maybe get a top 35 at next weekend's Brickyard 400. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series. As it was announced yesterday that the MX-5 Cup Series has been confirmed that they will be returning to Martinsville during the NASCAR weekend at the end of this year. Now, the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series is some of the best racing I have generally ever seen. They take these Mazda MX-5 Miatas out to racetracks like Daytona. They've done it at Martinsville before. They did it last year, and I watched the race last year, and it was some of the most wildest and fun racing that I think we've ever seen. And it's awesome they're bringing it back once again in 2025. If you've never seen it before, I suggest watching because it can have some good things that happen. And there are drivers who have ran in Mazda MX-5 Cup that come from the NASCAR world, like Connor Zilisch, for example. Guys like Jesse Love. There's a couple guys in that series that are part of like Toyota's development. Like Gretchen Wagner, I believe, is part of Toyota's development. Weston Workman's part of that. And there's a couple other people who've come from that series who've moved up, like Preston Pardus, who's had a lot of success in the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series. So I love this series. It's a fun series to watch. Mazda MX-5 is something that I suggest watching every single year. And I think it's going to be really fun to see them run at Martinsville. They're probably going to be slower than the NASCAR Cup cars. And I think it's going to be wild for sure. But at the same same time, I love the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series. The racing's fun to watch. It's great to listen into, see all the chaos and the craziness that the series can put on. It's going to be really fun to watch, really exciting. Glad to see the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series will be returning at Martinsville. I think it's going to be good, and I think the race will be really strong and really fun to watch at Martinsville at the end of the year in about 3 or 4 months from now. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Nolan Siegel. As it was announced and confirmed yesterday that Nolan Siegel has been officially cleared to run the IndyCar race at Toronto Speedway. Now, it has been also confirmed that Linus Lundqvist will be the reserve driver and will be the backup driver just in case Nolan Siegel could not make it through the weekend and cannot make it through the whole entire race. Nolan Siegel, of course, was involved in a very scary crash during the Iowa races on Saturday. He unfortunately backed in the outside wall really hard. It was not cleared to run the second race at Iowa because he wasn't feeling well enough. You could tell by the way he kind of talked after that incident. He wasn't feeling fantastic after what had happened on the racetrack there. And I'm glad to see that he has been cleared to run this weekend. Again, if he doesn't feel good enough to get through the rest of the weekend, then we will have Linus Lundqvist behind the wheel of that car. I'm glad Linus is getting a chance and opportunity to be there, at least as a standby driver and reserve driver for the team. But I think it's also good that Nolan is cleared to run. He's got a really good engineer. He's working with Kyle Moyer, is a fantastic race engineer. And I think that it's going to be good to see Nolan get the back behind the wheel of the race car. The big question is, can he get through the weekend? I think that's a big thing to definitely watch for sure. But I think it's good that he has been cleared. I want to see Nolan get better as a driver. He showed some improvement at Mid-Ohio and was doing an okay job at Iowa before that really scary crash and incident. But nonetheless, I'm glad to see Nolan has been good to clear. He'll get the race this weekend at Toronto. He'll try to get through the rest of the year. We've only got 5 races left in IndyCar. Most likely, Alex Palou is going to win the championship in a couple weeks now. He's got a near 150-point lead, and Palou is absolutely the favorite to win the race on Sunday afternoon. So we'll see how things go for Nolan Siegel, but I think he's going to have a good opportunity. I think he is going to be very competitive. I don't think there's any question about that. I think it's good to see him back and good to see that Nolan Siegel has been cleared to run the IndyCar race this weekend at Toronto. Really good stuff, in my opinion. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story in today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, we've already talked about the fact that Kyle Larson won the Joker's jackpot at Eldora last night. But there was something interesting that he talked about after picking up that win at Eldora last night that many of you probably saw that watched the race. Well, Kyle Larson basically came in and defended dirt racing in a pretty major way. He basically, there's this misconception about dirt racing where he says he's going down there and beating down all the dirt guys that are racing against her. He says that is not absolutely true. He says there's a lot of talent in this series, and he says that this is the toughest type of racing that there is in the world, and I love coming down and racing in it. Again, there's been this huge misconception that a lot of people talk about, oh, Kyle Larson's going up against a bunch of farmers, going up against a bunch of people that don't know how to race cars. I can tell you from watching dirt racing over the years that there are a lot of guys who have had success in motorsports and who've won a lot of events, who have made their living off of doing racing in dirt. Look at guys like the Jacob Ballins, for example. Think about Brad Sweet. Brad Sweet actually tried to come to NASCAR, wasn't too successful, unfortunately, on the NASCAR side. Went back down to dirt and has won multiple high-limit championships, one of the most successful World of Outlaws drivers ever. Some drivers have their ways of racing and other things. And I think for Kyle Larson, I think he wants to make dirt racing kind of be taken seriously. And I go on social media a lot of times, and I see people that go after Kyle Larson because, oh, Larson goes down and races in dirt. That doesn't mean he's a good driver. I've seen that multiple times. And Kyle Larson is a fantastic race car driver. Yes, I know there's been a slump for Larson over the last month or so, but I think for Kyle Larson, he's racing against some guys that have absolutely a ton of talent and a lot of potential to be champions of the racing sport regardless of what type of racing they're in. So I think that defending dirt racing, I think that's so important that Larson is doing that, and I appreciate him for doing that because I think what Larson is doing and everything he accomplishes in the sport, I think is absolutely phenomenal. And I think dirt racing needs to be taken a lot more seriously by a lot of fans. If you don't love dirt racing, that's perfectly fine, but a lot of people love it. There's a huge grassroots movement of people who would rather watch dirt racing than watch NASCAR, for example. Watch IndyCar, for example. And I think that's absolutely okay. Some of us like our different niches. But we shouldn't bring people down because they like something else or they think something is more competitive. I think dirt racing is some of the funnest racing out there from everything I watch. And I think that you can have a lot of fun watching it if you are a fan. So I appreciate Larson coming in and defending dirt racing and basically saying it how it is. I think dirt racing is fantastic. I think it could be fun. Glad to see he defended dirt racing in a really big way. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bristol Motor Speedway. Now, yesterday, Marcus Smith, who is the president of SMI, was on the Happy Harvick podcast yesterday discussing some things about the future of Bristol Motor Speedway. Talk about some of his all-time favorite races that he's ever been to, race that they've put on at certain tracks. But he talked about some future things he'd like to see with, let's say, Bristol Motor Speedway. And Marcus Smith did confirm something that we've heard a couple times, but he says that he would love to see a roof over Bristol Motor Speedway and would love to turn the track into a dome. He also said he'd love to see like some WWE events take place at the track in the future, and also love to see like some UFC, some other big events take place that are not just associated with NASCAR. Kind of like the MLB Speedway Classic that's going to be taking place in about a month from now. I am really intrigued to see how this roof could go, because it's not the first time there's been suggestions about it. I know there's been talk about for a long time since Bristol pretty much became a Coliseum about 30 years ago. There's been a lot of talk about them trying to build a roof over Bristol Motor Speedway and pretty much make it a dome. One reason why they've suggested it is because of the weather situation. A lot of times when you look at the spring Bristol races, for example, a lot of those races turn into wet situations, and when it gets wet and the track gets wet, they can't run the races. Yes, they do have wet weather tires, and they have tested them a couple times, I believe, at Bristol Motor Speedway. I could be wrong on that, but they don't really have an opportunity to run when the track unfortunately gets way too wet. If you build a roof over the track, you'd have the opportunity to, one, not have to deal with a lot of weather issues. You wouldn't have to probably deal with too much lightning more than likely because you're inside a dome at that point. And I think it'd be very interesting if they could make this concept of building a roof. Now, other thing that probably needs to happen before they do this, though, is getting the racing better at Bristol Motor Speedway. I gotta admit, the last time we ran at Bristol Motor Speedway for all three races, not just the Cup Series, but the Xfinity Series and Truck Series races, weren't that great this year. And I think it's just a Bristol issue at this point. The Xfinity race there was not that good. Yes, Kyle Larson dominated, but the racing behind Larson was not spectacular. And then the truck race, which was the best race of the weekend, Raj Groove had way older tires than the guys behind him, and they never could get by him because the grooves are not able to make those moves. I think Bristol needs to work on that. I think a roof needs to be a priority down the road, but they also need to try to make sure that they can get things on the right track in regards to that in the future. So we'll see what happens with the future of Bristol Motor Speedway and whether they can get a roof on the track. I'd love to see it for sure, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, there's a lot that's going to be needed to be done if they want to get that roof on the track in the future. We'll have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to that, and maybe down the road we do see a roof on Bristol Motor Speedway in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, there has been a lot of talk about Shane Van Gisbergen throughout this week. Of course, Shane Van Gisbergen has won 3 of the last 6 NASCAR Cup Series races that have taken place on the schedule, including back-to-back wins at the Chicago Street Course and Sonoma. But everyone's talking about how SVG is not fantastic at ovals. Well, Kyle Larson actually came to the defense of Shane Van Gisbergen recently by saying that Larson says that Shane Van Gisbergen could be dominant in the Cup Series if he figures out the ovals. And Shane Van Gisbergen talking about him, yes, we know his oval numbers have not been fantastic in the NASCAR Cup Series. That is where he's lacking at this point. But in Shane Van Gisbergen's defense, his oval numbers have started to improve. Early in the first 7 oval races that took place on the schedule, Shane Van Gisbergen had a 30th place average finish in the field. In the last 7 or 8 races, it's gone from 30th to 22nd. In fact, during the Coca-Cola 600 earlier this year, Shane Van Gisbergen scored a top 15 finish on pure pace and speed and got damaged in that race, remember? So he had an opportunity to even get a better finish. He said he had a top 10 car in that race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. He had a really fast car, ran top 10, top 5 majority of the event, unfortunately got caught up in an incident and went multiple laps down, but finished in the top 25. I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to surprise a lot of people throughout the remainder of the year. I look next week at Indy. I think he's a sleeper to have a really good run because remember, he got a top 5 at Indianapolis earlier this year, or last year in the Xfinity Series. So I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to figure out the ovals really, really soon, and I think he's absolutely going to get better at the ovals. I think he's got that potential to do it, and I think he will show a lot of that improvement that I think a lot of people are expecting at this point. Again, it takes time for someone to adjust, but I think if any driver that's been coming through Motorsports that can adjust to those cars, it is Shane Van Gisbergen. He's got the team that's getting better. Trackhouse just picked up a massive hire who was over Tom Meredith, who was over Joe Gibbs Racing for many years, including at the dominant era of Joe Gibbs from 2013 to 2016, where that team was extremely dominant. I have a lot of faith and confidence that you are going to see SVG get better at ovals. I think that improvement is going to come. And I think he'll show a lot of the improvement that I think a lot of people are expecting from him at this point. So yes, he hasn't had that big moment where he's improved yet, but I do think by the end of Shane Van Gisbergen's career, I think he will be good enough, and I think he will have a chance and opportunity to win some oval races for the end of his career and into the not-so-distant future. I think he'll be good. I think he'll be good at ovals in the future, and I think he's going to start finishing top 10 and even maybe top 5 maybe before the end of this year. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. Now, there is a report that came out earlier this week that I did not mention early in the video from earlier today, but a lot of it comes from the NASCAR account NASCAR Rumors Nostalgia. And they have heard a rumor that Spire Motorsports may shut down the number 77 truck effective immediately, which could affect Andres Perez. And continuing on with the report, Andres Perez, it sounds like, will be looking for rides throughout the remainder of the 2025 season. Now, currently at the moment, he is part of a 4-car organization. The 7 truck, which has been the one competing for the Owners' Championship this year, which I believe is 7th in the Owners' points at this point, who's picked up a few wins with Kyle Busch and Carson Hocevar have scored wins in that truck, and drivers like Michael McDowell have driven that truck this year, and Justin Haley as well. Continuing on, they have the 07 truck that's been a little bit lacking in performance. They're going to have Brendan Butterby Queen in that truck that next week at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Then, of course, you do have the 71 that Roger Crew's been driving, and then you have the 77 truck that Andreas is driving. Spire, of course, originally had 3 trucks last year, but they brought the Rev Racing team in, and the 77 team, I believe, is very similar to the Rev Racing truck from last season. Now, let's be real and honest. Spire Motorsports is very spread thin. They have, of course, 3 full-time NASCAR Cup Series teams right now, and they've got 4 trucks. I think, and also an ARCA team, not to mention as well. For Andres Perez, this is no disrespect to him. Yes, he won the ARCA championship last year in 2024. But he didn't win a single race. He came close to winning a few races, but unlike Brendan Butterby Queen, who's picked up 3 wins in ARCA this year and is likely going to win the championship if he continues at the pace he's going, I haven't seen Andres really contend for many wins. And this year in the Truck Series, he's been, in my opinion, he has been worse than Chase Purdy. Chase Purdy got a couple top 10s and contended for a few wins in the Craftsman Truck Series. I'm not saying Andres sucks. I think Andres has a lot of potential, but he was not ready to make that jump up to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. I think he needed another year to make that jump, and it was disappointing to see him struggle this season because, again, I think that he has talent. I think he's shown potential. He ran really well in the race at Mexico in the Xfinity Series with DGM Racing. Plus, he does have a lot of experience there, but he's a very talented driver. My question is, where does he go for the remainder of the year if this does happen? Does he go to, let's say, do they put him in a 07 truck perhaps? Does he go to, let's say, I don't know, maybe Nice Motorsports at points because I don't know what the remainder of their schedule is going to be. Does he go to, let's say, Rackley War? They run a second truck. I'm not sure at this point, but it's disappointing to hear this news for Andres because I'd like to see him stick around in the series, and that's why they need to get the purses up for the Truck Series because that's a big reason why I think this also is happening is because you have a situation where the purse money is not that good in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series right now. It's being affected by that at this point, and I really hope they do increase the purse money going forward into the future because I think people like Andres deserve a chance and opportunity to race in the sport. It's a shame that it might affect him at this point, and it's a shame he may not be racing in NASCAR after this week, after IRP. He might be looking for a new ride. We'll have to wait and see what happens, and we'll see if Andres can find a ride at this point for the remainder of 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking a little bit about the 2026 NASCAR schedule. Now, we're going to talk about the reports on the San Diego reports here in just a short little bit, but Jordan Bianchi released an article in regards to some things that he has heard in regards to the 2026 NASCAR schedule. And there were some very interesting things that he did know throughout this. Now, he did, of course, put out the Daytona 500 is going to be on February 15th. He also put that, we'll talk about North Wilkesboro here in a second, but he also did put Bowman Gray will be on February 1st, and Homestead will be the season finale. Of course, Southern 500 will be on September 7th or 8th, and the Coke 600 will be on May 25th of 2026. But there's some interesting things that he did note in the article that have not been mentioned in videos that I've talked about. First, let's begin with Mexico City. There is a very uncertain future around Mexico City currently at the moment right now, and there are some that are expecting that NASCAR will not return to Mexico City in the 2026 season. There are some thinking they could return. They're trying to strike the deal for 2026 as we speak, but there's a lot of uncertainty around that currently at the moment. There's a couple big reasons why there's uncertainty around Mexico City. Number one, you do have the fact that the World Cup is going to be taking place in 2026, I believe in North America, if I'm not mistaken, and also taking place around the Mexico area as well. But the other big reason, IndyCar. IndyCar is in major talks currently at the moment right now to have a race there in 2026. They're making that a major priority for IndyCar to have an international date in Mexico, especially since there's rumors that Toronto may not be on the schedule for IndyCar. They might be going back to Watkins Glen. There's been some talk about that as of late. And I think especially with Pato O'Ward really pushing for a race to be in Mexico City, I think there's definitely major questions around if they're going to race in Mexico next year. I'm leaning toward that date will go to San Diego. That's where I think that will end up next year. And Mexico's future is certainly in question. Moving on, there was a lot of talk early in the year that North Wilkesboro could get a points-paying day. It sounds like the people that Jordan Bianchi has talked to, he says that North Wilkesboro will likely once again host the All-Star race in 2026. I'm a little disappointed to hear that news because I think, especially for short tracks, I think North Wilkesboro is the best short track when it comes to racing currently at the moment, especially for the next-gen car. I think if you have 400 laps at the track as a points-paying event, I think the racing there will absolutely be phenomenal and really good to watch, especially for the Truck Series and Xfinity Series if they both also do get points-paying races as well. But I also understand why they want to keep North Wilkesboro as an all-star event, because you can have the opportunity. I just think it would make more sense for it to be a points-paying race and give that day to Rockingham Press, but also you don't know if the Cup Series will be ready there. We don't even know what the future of Rockingham is currently at the moment with the sale that is currently going on. And the final big thing that was noted is Circuit of the Americas. While nothing has been officially announced and confirmed, even though there's been renewal dates that have been posted as of recently, it is expected that Circuit of the Americas will return to NASCAR in 2026, most likely in early March. I love hearing this news. Circuit Americas is a fantastic racetrack, I think, especially for road course standards, especially since they went to the shorter circuit. I think the racing there this year was actually really good. You had a phenomenal battle for the win between Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, William Byron, and Tyler Reddick. The four guys going up there battling for the win, being fair and square about that. I thought that was incredible, and he had a great Xfinity Series race on top of that as well. The big question will be is, will all three series be there next year, or will it just continue being the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series? Because there's rumors and speculation now that Sonoma Raceway may be getting the Truck Series back in 2026, which will be the first time since 2022 that the Truck Series has raced at Sonoma Raceway. In general, we're still waiting on some of the other big things to be announced and confirmed and be reported. Again, we do expect some other dates to be announced here soon, and the fact we're starting to get a lot of schedule announcements and a lot of schedule rumors tells me we're not too far away from the official schedule being released for 2026, which I'm very intrigued to see what the schedule exactly is going to look like for the 2026 year. We'll be paying attention to this as time progresses and goes on, but I'm very intrigued to see what the rest schedule is going to look like. Gateway, I don't know what their future is past this year. I'd like to see Gateway back on the schedule once again next season. We'll have to kind of wait and see on that front with the remainder of the schedule, and we'll wait to see what other stuff gets confirmed with as time progresses and goes on. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about San Diego. Now, I mentioned this just a second ago, but we are talking about San Diego here because we talked about it as I did a video covering the story on the channel as well yesterday. But as reported by Kelly Crandall from Racer.com, she has reported that NASCAR is headed to San Diego in 2026. An announcement is officially expected in the middle of next week. I've heard an announcement might be coming in the middle of next week as well, so keep an update on that, but announcement according to her is expected next week at some point. While the layout has not been officially confirmed, as she reported in the article as well, it is expected to be around the Coronado area. That area makes a lot of sense from what a lot of people are saying, and that's where they're kind of looking at as well. Now, there's been no official announcement and confirmation as well when this race would take place. Dale Jr. has suggested this race could potentially take place maybe as a replacement for the Mexico City weekend, and he talked about also Mexico City being back on the schedule next year, but this likely will be replacement for Mexico City going into 2026. A big reason why they are pushing for this, though, is because it is expected right now that the Chicago Street Courses course and the opportunity for the track to be on the schedule past 2025 will likely come to an end. I know that Jordy has suggested in the article there are still some talks and discussions that they could come back to the Chicago Street Course, and I think that is still certainly possible for next year, but especially with rumors of Chicago being back on the schedule for next season, I don't think that is going to fully be an option at this moment right now. So that means NASCAR wants to continue doing the street course race. And also, it's been noted for the last couple of years, but NASCAR wants to continue having a race in the Southern California market. NASCAR has not raced in the Southern California market as a points-paying race since 2023 when they race at Auto Club Speedway. For NASCAR to be known as a major metropolitan thing and being known as a major series, you need to be in at least one or two of the three major markets. The three major markets are the Southern California market, which encapsulates Los Angeles as well, where Auto Club Speedway used to be. It also encapsulates the Chicago market, which we'll get to that in just a second. And then, of course, the New York City market, which Watkins Glen kind of fits that a little bit, but it doesn't really fit that at this point. So I think Watkins Glen's kind of upward like Niagara Falls is or something like that, I'm pretty sure. Up near the Buffalo area, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, though. But going back to San Diego, there's a big positive with San Diego likely coming on the schedule. Number one, the weather. The weather in San Diego, from what I know and from people have told me, is that the weather during that time is generally really good. And you're likely not going to have to deal with rain issues. They don't get a ton of rain in the San Diego area. Now watch, I say this, and they do get a bunch of rain during that time. But San Diego doesn't have to deal with a lot of the weather issues and weather factors that really come into play. So that's a big positive there. And number two, I think a street course race absolutely needs to be on the schedule for NASCAR. I think it's been a big success for Chicago. I know this year's race did not have the ratings that I think they were really looking for, but I thought the ratings generally have been decent the first 2 years, and I think especially if you put this race, let's say on Prime or major network, I think it will be a massive success on that particular moment there. Now, I think that down the road, you're going to see more street courses come on the schedule in the future. I think you're going to see, like Boston, there's been talk about maybe going up to the Northeast, racing like Boston, for example. I know Ryan Preece suggested that. There's also been talk about maybe down the road going to Cincinnati, talking about going to the Denver area. I think that if they could find a way to revive the Pikes Peak Raceway track, if they could find a way to get that track up, if it's gone at this point, I would love to see that track maybe come on the schedule in the future as well. But for San Diego, I think this absolutely is really exciting to see because you need to have a street course race on the schedule. And there's going to be this big debate that's going to come out, right, on how many road courses are going to be on the schedule. Because, again, there might be 5 or 6. Jordan Bianchi noted in the article as well when we talked about that the Roval likely is coming back. So you're probably going to have at least 5 or 6 road courses. And I'm just saying, if you're a Shane Van Gisbergen fan like myself, you should be really excited about this because Shane Van Gisbergen is fantastic at road courses, and he's going to be absolutely the favorite to win this San Diego race. Now, the big thing you're all wondering is what does this mean for the Chicago area if Chicago Street Course doesn't come back? Like I mentioned in the video earlier today, Chicago Speedway is expected to be back on the schedule next year, according to what we're hearing. It's not been confirmed, but Chicagoland, they're working on trying to get that race on the schedule for next year. There are people working in that area to get that track up the surface, and I do think you will be seeing a race at Chicagoland in 2026, which, let's be real and honest, the racing at Chicagoland is probably going to be a little bit better than the racing is at Chicago or San Diego. But I'm very excited about this. This is going to happen when it was reported, because we've been hearing rumors about this since around the time we knew that Connor Zolsch was going to be going to Junior Motorsports next year. We started getting rumors around that time, and there were some people saying, oh, it wasn't going to happen, some saying it is going to happen, and now we know officially for sure, and it's confirmed that it will happen for the 2026 year, and I'm really excited about that. We'll probably know more details on when the race exactly is going to happen here in the not-so-distant future, among other things coming up really soon. But I love this. I think it's huge for the sport that they're going to be headed to San Diego next year. I think that Southern California market is an area they really need to tap, and I get people are tired of all the road courses among other things, but at the same time, you need to have some road courses on the schedule. There's been road course racing for over 70 years in NASCAR history, people. That's been around since like 1952 or 1953, so they've been doing railroad courses for a very long time. So I think for San Diego, it's a really big deal. I'm excited to see they're going to tap that market, and the weather should be really good. Excited to see that San Diego is expected to be on the NASCAR schedule in 2026 as a street course date. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story in today's episode as we're talking about updates to the 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit. Now, we've made multiple videos covering the story on the channel over the course of the last couple weeks. Let's go back to the beginning of this lawsuit. Obviously, 2311 Front Row are currently suing NASCAR on antitrust claims. At the end of last year, they filed a preliminary injunction so they could compete as charter teams for the 2025 season throughout the whole entire year. NASCAR, of course, appealed that preliminary injunction, and back in May, it was confirmed that they had lost their preliminary injunction case, and they would be able to have the opportunity to appeal it, which they did appeal it. Now, again, they did appeal that preliminary injunction, and recently they sought, which of course they were expected to lose those charters. They filed for another preliminary injunction, and no decision has made on that preliminary injunction at this time. But we got confirmation yesterday that 23LM Racing Front Row, as expected, will be open teams for the next 2 races at Dover and Indianapolis Motor Speedway, as they have been denied their temporary restraining order on those charters so they could compete as charter teams throughout the remainder of this season, so that NASCAR could also not sell those charters at this time. Now, in NASCAR's filings that came out, they basically said they are not planning to sell those charters at this time until the decision on the preliminary injunction comes. That preliminary injunction really could come at any given time, at any moment. If we do get official confirmation on that, we will do a video on that at this point. Now, 2311 Front Row's lawyer, Jeffrey Kessler, did come out with a response to this situation, and he basically said they were not very happy with the outcome and decision, but they also did confirm that NASCAR has told them that they are not planning to sell the charters until the end of the case. But if they are to sell the charters, according to what the judge said last night, he said that if they do try to sell those charters, they have to tell the courts they are planning to do it, but it also could affect them in a really, really big way. As I noted, if they do lose their preliminary injunction overall throughout the remainder of this case, they will basically have the opportunity to sell those charters. I've said this from the get-go. If NASCAR tries to sell those charters to other organizations and teams, I personally think that they should not be able to sell those charters until the full case is over, where basically 2311 and Front Row are open teams for the remainder of the season, and they have to give all the money back that they have received throughout the year so far as charter organizations and teams. But NASCAR cannot sell those charters to other organizations and teams. And it's been noted that NASCAR has a lot of teams that are interested in buying charters at this point. I think of Legacy Motor Club. They want to be a 3-car team next year. They might have Daniel Suarez or Jesse Love in that car potentially next season. There's interest from RFK Racing to make sure they don't get picked up in the Rick Ware and Legacy lawsuit in some way, shape, or form. So they probably like to have a 3rd car potentially, make sure they have this, so Keselowski can't continue racing and Priest and Buescher can't continue being teammates on the team next year or past 2026. And there's other teams that are interested. We've seen reports recently that Ray Hall, Leonard Lanigan Racing is actually interested in having a team in NASCAR in potentially the Truck Series, maybe with the Ram program perhaps. There's a potential for that happening, and maybe then down the road we could see Ray Hall in Cup. And I know there's talk about Honda and other teams maybe expanding and Dodge coming to the Cup Series in the future. But the other big thing we got to talk about is the contract side of things, because a lot of these drivers in their contracts are required to have a charter. Drivers like Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Corey Heim, who's not fully in 2311 yet, but is probably going to be a 2311 racing driver in the not-so-distant future. Riley Herbst. You also got Todd Gillen, Zane Smith, and Noah Gragson, who are being affected by this. They all are required to have charters and compete in charter cars for the 2026 season or 2025. If they don't get these charters back in any way, shape, or form, there is a potential possibility that these drivers all could end up being free agents. The big one, of course, being Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick, in my opinion, is someone that is very highly sought out by other organizations and teams that they want to sign him for 2026. And if he doesn't have a contract with 2311 and doesn't have a charter car, he could walk away from 2311 Racing effective immediately. But I don't expect Tyler Reddick to leave the organization and team until the lawsuit is completely over. If 2311 Racing and Front Row do lose the overall lawsuit, then those charters can't come back. But one thing we need to make sure that is clear, this does not have a full effect on the entire case. I have to keep reiterating that because a lot of people are saying that NASCAR and 2311 Front Row need to enter a settlement. NASCAR said they've tried to reach a settlement with 2311 Front Row, but according to them, they've denied it. 2311 Front Row have said the same thing at this point, that they have tried to deny it. The judge also did say, though, that they doesn't buy all the stuff around Tyler Reddick becoming a free agent immediately, which, again, that's not what was said originally from 2311 Front Row's lawyers. They said that he could leave the team by the end of the year if he doesn't have a charter. He doesn't buy that, which, again, there's contracts out there. If they could present the contracts that show that, I think that would help their case in this preliminary injunction side of things. For Tyler Reddick, though, at this point, what do you do? What do you do if you are the drivers in this organization? Because you may not be racing in 2026 with your own organization. And let's say they do lose the lawsuit, right? 2311 in Front Row could be definitely in major, major jeopardy. That's why I think there needs to be a thing coming out there. I think that TRO absolutely should have been enforced where they can't sell those charters to other organizations and teams. Because let's say the 2311 in Front Row do, in fact, win the overall lawsuit. and they get their charters back in money, you're going to have other teams that are going to get swooped up in this, and then you're going to have more lawyers that are coming into play. And more lawyers and lawsuits, among other things, that are coming to effect. And it's just going to get messier and messier if things like that happen, because you have drivers that might want to sign with these teams and other organizations, but they can't do it because the line is clogged up with the amount of charters at this point right now. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the remainder of this lawsuit between 2011 and Front Row, because I think that, again, this doesn't have effect on it. And one thing that I do believe is correct is that if 2011 Front Row attempt to qualify for every single race, they can be good. And one thing I did not mention is if there are more than 40 cars that do show up at the Brickyard 400 next week, they can change the ruling on the TRO, and then maybe he grants a TRO at least for the Brickyard 400. It could be a week-by-week basis at this point. So we probably won't get a ruling on the preliminary injunction until after the Brickyard 400, but it's going to affect 2011 Front Row at least for a little bit, because now they're not going to be getting as much money, and they have to qualify in for every single race. Now, for this weekend at Dover, there's only 37 cars that showed up, so they don't have to worry about that, but they're going to be starting in the back of the field more than likely. They're going to be qualifying earlier because open teams qualify earlier than the non-open teams, and that will affect their track position in a really big way. And let's say for sure that Bubba Wallace doesn't make the playoffs, or if Reddick doesn't make it, because there still is a chance that Tyler Reddick and Bubba could miss the playoffs this year, though I do think Reddick is likely going to make it this year, and I do think Bubba has a really good chance, so Bubba's only 3 points above the cutoff line. I think both teams have been affected, though, by their performance, have been affected because of this lawsuit in some way, shape, or form, and I think that it's going to be interesting to follow this story. But nonetheless, for now, 2012 and Front Row are open teams for the remainder of this season at this moment, for at least the next couple weeks, and I would not be surprised if they don't win their preliminary injunction and lose their charters overall. So we'll keep an update on this story throughout the remainder of the year, because this lawsuit is going to be a big story. I'll be honest, I'm kind of tired of covering this story, but I got to keep covering it at this point. But for now, 2011 Front Row will be open teams for at least the next couple weeks. They might be open teams for the remainder of the year. We'll have to keep an update on this story as time progresses and goes on. So that is going to today's Law NASCAR News and Motorsports News episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are thoughts about the updates to the 2011 and Front Row Motorsports case? Let me know in the comments below. And what are thoughts about San Diego expected to be on the schedule next year? Let me know it in the comments below. Later this afternoon, you're going to see reactions to the ARCA race from Dover, more than likely. Tomorrow, we're going to have reactions to the Xfinity Series and the Cup qualifying Xfinity race as well. Then Saturday, Sunday, if the weather holds up, we'll have the starting lineup video for the Cup race at Dover and the Cup review. If not, that review might come out on Monday if the race gets postponed. And we'll have a news video either coming out on Monday or Tuesday. We just got reports that Our Motorsports is actually shutting down effective immediately. We're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about more lawsuit updates and Michael Jordan as well. We're going to talk about people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Cards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Crate, Sam Mayer, Brickyard 400 stuff, Dodge Ram, Cletus McFarland, Kyle Larson, Ryan Preece, you name it, Brad Keselowski, Tyler Reddick, all the good stuff. We'll talk about it on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.